The quiet power that makes people respect you. There is a specific quality that certain people have, and most people cannot name it precisely, but they feel it immediately. It is not cloudness. The person who has it is often quiet. It is not force or aggression. The person who has it rarely raises their voice. It is not the performance of confidence, the practiced posture, the rehearsed authority, the carefully curated presence that falls apart when the pressure is genuine. What these people have is something structural rather than performed. It is a quality that exists in how they hold themselves, how they engage with situations, how they respond to what the social environment produces at them, and it communicates itself without requiring announcement. Other people adjust when this person enters the room, not because of their title or their power in the organizational sense, because there is something about their presence that signals a specific quality of person, someone who is genuinely grounded, who is not available to be moved by social pressure in the ordinary ways, who has a stable internal foundation that does not shift with the approval or disapproval of the environment. These people are respected, not universally loved, not always popular, genuinely respected. The distinction between popularity and respect is the entry point to this audiobook, because confusing them is one of the primary reasons people develop the wrong qualities and wonder why the wrong social experience results. Popularity is the product of behaviors that make people feel comfortable, entertained, or included in the moment. Respect is the product of something more durable, the consistent demonstration of a quality of character that others recognize as genuinely reliable, genuinely mature, and genuinely different from the socially performed version of those qualities that most people display. Respect cannot be claimed, it cannot be demanded, it cannot be manufactured through the performance of respectability. It is conferred by others automatically as their honest social assessment of what kind of person they are dealing with, and the qualities that produce it are specific and buildable. They are not a matter of personality type or native temperament. They are developed through the consistent practice of the specific internal disciplines that this audiobook describes. 10 chapters, each one developing a specific dimension of the quiet power that makes people respect you, not the loud power of assertion and dominance. The quiet power of genuine presence, genuine stability, and the specific quality of being that others sense as fundamentally trustworthy in the deepest sense of that word. Introduction. What respect actually is. Respect is not a feeling, it is an assessment. This distinction matters because feelings can be manufactured by the right performance, the right environment, the right emotional triggers. Assessments are more resistant to manufacture because they are built from the accumulated evidence of observed behavior across many instances and many conditions. The assessment of respect is the conclusion that emerges from the consistent observation of a person behaving in ways that are characteristic of specific qualities: reliability, maturity, integrity, groundedness across the full range of conditions they encounter, including the difficult ones. The difficult conditions are where the assessment is most importantly informed, because they are where the gap between the performed version of these qualities and the genuine version becomes visible. Reliability in comfortable conditions is not particularly informative. Reliability when meeting the commitment costs something that is the data point the respect assessment is built from. Composure in ordinary interactions is not informative. Composure when the pressure is high, when the provocation is real, When the loss of composure would be understandable, that is where the genuine quality is or is not demonstrated. The respect that this audiobook builds toward is not the respect of performance. It is the respect of genuine consistency, the quality of being that produces the same character across the comfortable and the uncomfortable conditions. Because it is rooted in something internal that holds regardless of what the external environment is producing. Chapter 1 begins with the foundational distinction: what respect is and what it is not, and why confusing them produces so much misdirected effort. Chapter 1: Respect versus popularity. Popularity is loud, respect is quiet. They feel similar from a distance and are almost entirely different up close. Most people, if pressed, will say they want respect rather than popularity, but their actual behavioral strategies, the choices they make in social environments about how to present themselves, what to say, how to respond to others, are typically optimized for the production of positive immediate reactions rather than for the development of the qualities that produce genuine respect. This is not hypocrisy. It is the gap between the stated preference and the socially reinforced behavior, which consistently produces positive immediate feedback for the popularity strategies and much less immediate reinforcement for the respect-building ones. Popularity strategies are immediately rewarding because they are designed to produce immediate positive responses. The entertaining comment, the agreement with the room, the self-deprecating humor that invites inclusion, the enthusiasm that signals likability — these behaviors produce the immediate warmth, the laughter, the social inclusion that the social brain registers as success. The feedback loop is tight. The behavior produces the positive response, which reinforces the behavior, which produces more positive responses. Respect-building behaviors do not produce immediate positive responses with the same consistency. The honest assessment that contradicts the room's preference does not produce immediate warmth. The refusal to agree with something you do not agree with does not produce immediate inclusion. The silence when the entertaining comment would be easy and the situation does not actually call for it does not produce immediate social reward. These behaviors produce something more delayed and more durable: the accumulation of the evidence that constitutes the respect assessment. The difference in the feedback loop is the primary reason people default to the popularity strategy even when they genuinely prefer respect. The immediate social environment consistently reinforces popularity behavior and provides no immediate reinforcement for the behaviors that build respect. Overriding this reinforcement differential requires the specific internal clarity about what is being built and why. The genuine understanding that the immediate social reward and the durable quality of the social assessment are different things that are produced by different behaviors. The specific nature of popularity as a social phenomenon is worth understanding precisely because it clarifies what it is not and therefore what is being traded for it. Popularity is based primarily on the production of positive effect in others, the feeling of being comfortable, entertained, included, or validated that the popular person reliably produces. This is genuinely pleasant, and the popular person typically experiences genuinely warm relationships in the conditions where they are performing the popularity behaviors well. The instability of popularity follows directly from this affective foundation. The positive effect it is based on is condition-dependent. The performance must be maintained. The entertainment must be delivered. The agreement must be provided. When the conditions change, when the popular person faces a genuine conflict of interest with the group, when they cannot or do not deliver the expected performance, when their honest assessment diverges from the group's preference, the effective foundation of the popularity is disrupted and the social standing built on it is revealed as more fragile than it appeared. Respect has a different and more stable foundation, the consistent demonstration of qualities that others assess as genuinely reliable over time. These qualities are assessed rather than felt, which makes them less immediately pleasant to produce and less immediately recognizable when being produced, but significantly more durable when produced consistently. The first of these qualities is behavioral consistency across conditions. The person who behaves according to the same standards in the comfortable conditions and the uncomfortable ones, who is reliable when reliability costs something, honest when honesty is inconvenient, composed when composure requires genuine effort, demonstrates a consistency that the effective performance basis of popularity cannot match. This consistency is what people mean when they describe someone as someone you know where you stand with. The respect assessment registers the consistency and builds on it. The second quality is the willingness to maintain positions under social pressure. The person who holds an accurate assessment when the room disagrees, who maintains a boundary when challenged, who sustains a commitment when honoring it becomes costly. This person is demonstrating something that the respect assessment specifically values, that their positions reflect genuine assessment rather than social calculation. The person whose positions reliably shift in the direction of social pressure is telling others something important about the reliability of those positions, and the information is registered. The third quality is the absence of the social performance orientation that popularity requires. The person who is not primarily calibrating their behavior to the production of positive immediate responses, who is not running the continuous assessment of what will be best received, has a quality of presence that others experience as genuine in a way that the performance-optimized behavior is not. This genuineness is not dramatic or demonstrative. It is visible in the small moments, the silence instead of the easy entertaining comment, the honest observation instead of the flattering one, the calm disengagement from the social game instead of the competitive participation in it. The transition from the popularity orientation to the respect-building one is not a single dramatic shift. It is the gradual reorientation of the behavioral strategies, driven by the genuine clarity about what is being built and the willingness to accept the reduced immediate social reinforcement that the transition produces. The immediate social environment will not reward the early stages of this transition. The behaviors that build respect do not produce immediate positive feedback in the way that popularity behaviors do. The reward comes later, in the form of the specific quality of regard that genuine respect produces, which is different from and in most important ways better than the effective warmth of popularity. The person who is respected is trusted with genuine things. The person who is popular is invited to pleasant events. Both are genuinely positive social experiences. They are not equally valuable, and the behaviors that produce each are not interchangeable. This audiobook is about building the one that is genuinely earned and genuinely durable. Chapter 2. Psychological presence. Presence is not a performance. It is what remains when the performance has been removed. Psychological presence, the specific quality of being genuinely, attentively, and groundedly in a situation, is among the rarest and most recognized qualities in ordinary social environments. Most people in most interactions are not fully present. They are partially elsewhere, planning their next contribution to the conversation, monitoring how they are being perceived, managing the internal narrative about the interaction, attending to the social performance that the situation requires. The fraction of their attention that is genuinely directed at what is actually happening is typically less than it would be if they could see and correct for all the demands that are drawing it elsewhere. This partial absence is the normal condition of ordinary social engagement, and most people are sufficiently acclimated to it that they do not notice it as absence. It is simply how conversations feel. What they notice when they encounter it is the exceptional quality of genuine presence. The person who is fully attending, who is genuinely interested in what you are saying, who is not simultaneously managing their own performance, who is receiving you without the filtered processing of the partial elsewhere state, produces a specific and recognizable effect. You feel seen. You feel genuinely engaged with rather than socially processed. And the assessment of that person, formed in the experience of their genuine attention, is qualitatively different from the assessment formed in the experience of the more ordinary partial engagement. Psychological presence is both a quality of attention and a quality of being, the developed state in which the demands that normally draw attention away from the present situation are sufficiently regulated that genuine attentiveness is available. It cannot be performed in the way that other social qualities can be performed, because the performance of presence requires the attention that genuine presence would be directing at the other person. Attempted performed presence produces the uncanny quality that most people have experienced from someone who is doing all the visible things of engaged attention: the eye contact, the nodding, the occasional verbal acknowledgement, while communicating through the absence of genuine registration that they are not actually there. The authentic version requires the genuine regulation of the internal demands, the planning, the monitoring, the self-narrative, the performance management that are normally consuming the attentional resources that presence requires. This regulation is the practical project of developing psychological presence, and it proceeds through the same progressive practice logic as all the other capacities in this audiobook. The first internal demand to understand and regulate is the self-monitoring function, the continuous assessment of how you are being perceived. What impression is being formed, whether the social performance is succeeding. This monitoring is not entirely without value. Social feedback is genuinely useful, and the complete absence of self-monitoring produces social obliviousness. But the degree of monitoring that most people engage in is significantly beyond what is necessary for effective social functioning. It consumes substantial additional resources, produces significant social anxiety as its byproduct, and most relevantly for presence, removes attention from the person and situation being engaged with and redirects it toward the internal assessment of how the engagement is going. Reducing the self-monitoring function does not mean abandoning social attentiveness. It means recognizing that the continuous real-time assessment of how you are being perceived is both less accurate than it feels. The social assessments of others are largely inaccessible to you in real time, regardless of how much attention you direct at decoding them, and less important than the quality of the actual engagement it is preventing. The person who attends genuinely to what you are saying typically produces a better interaction, and therefore a better assessment, and the person who attends primarily to how they are being perceived while saying it. The second internal demand that presence requires regulating is the future orientation, the tendency to be partly in the next moment, planning the upcoming contribution, strategizing about where the conversation is going, anticipating and pre-managing situations that have not yet developed. This future orientation is not random, it is the planning function of the cognitive system doing what it is designed to do, which is to prepare for anticipated situations before they arrive. In the context of presence, however, it produces the specific absence quality that undermines genuine engagement with what is actually happening right now. The regulation practice for future orientation is the deliberate return to the immediate, not the suppression of planning. The planning function is genuinely useful and will resume whenever genuine planning is needed. The repeated, gentle redirection of attention from the anticipated future of the interaction to the actual present of it. What is this person specifically saying right now? And what is the most accurate and complete reception of it? This redirection, practiced consistently, builds the attentional habit of genuine presence over time. The quality of groundedness that presence produces is its most socially recognizable feature. The grounded person is not reactive to the minor social fluctuations that move the ungrounded one, the slight cooling of tone, the ambiguous remark, the small social pressure, not because they are unaware of these fluctuations, but because their internal state is not primarily determined by them. Their center of gravity is internal rather than external, which produces the specific quality of settled, non-anxious engagement that others experience as the presence that commands respect. Groundedness is a state that is built through the consistent practice of not being moved by the things that do not warrant movement, through the accumulated experience of encountering the small social pressures and fluctuations and remaining stable, not through the suppression of the noticing, but through the governance of what the noticing produces as internal state and behavioral response. Each instance of maintained stability in the face of a minor social pressure is a practice session. Each practice session is a small increment of the built capacity. The increment is invisible in the moment. The accumulated capacity is unmistakable over time. Psychological presence, fully developed, produces the specific social effect that most people experience as the quality of someone genuinely worth paying attention to, not because they are saying the most interesting things or performing the most compelling social behavior, because they are genuinely attentive, genuinely stable, genuinely engaged with what is actually happening rather than with the social performance that most interactions are substituting for it. This quality is felt before it is analyzed. Others register it automatically without needing to identify what specifically they are responding to. And the assessment it produces, the specific sense of being in the presence of someone who is genuinely there, is the foundation on which the respect this audiobook builds is constructed. Chapter 3: Emotional Stability. Emotional stability is not the absence of feeling. It is the quality of being that does not require the environment to be stable in order to remain stable itself. Of all the qualities that produce genuine respect, emotional stability is among the most consistently recognized and most consistently underestimated in its difficulty. It is underestimated because it appears passive. The stable person is not doing much that is visible. They are simply not losing composure, not becoming reactive, not displaying the emotional volatility that the unstable person displays in the same conditions. The passivity of the appearance conceals the active quality of the internal work that produces it. What others are actually assessing when they recognize emotional stability in a person is the specific reliability of that person's character under pressure. The person who is emotionally stable when conditions are comfortable and pleasant is not being assessed. Anyone can be stable in comfortable conditions. The stability that produces respect is the stability that holds when conditions are genuinely difficult, when the pressure is real, when the provocation is significant, when the loss of stability would be understandable and, by the implicit social standard, forgivable. The person who maintains their equanimity in those conditions is demonstrating something that most people cannot demonstrate, not because they are not feeling what the situation is producing, but because what they feel does not automatically become what they express as behavioral output. The social function of emotional stability is specific and important. In any group environment, a team, a relationship, an organization, a social circle, the emotional climate of the group is substantially influenced by the emotional displays of its members. Emotional states are socially contagious. The anxious display activates anxiety in the environment. The frustrated display activates frustration. The confident and grounded display stabilizes the social temperature. The person who consistently brings the regulated, stable emotional display to the social environment is performing a specific social function. They are the stabilizing force. The ground the environment can return to when the social temperature has risen. This stabilizing function is one of the primary mechanisms through which emotional stability produces respect. Others experience the stable person as a resource in difficult conditions, as the person whose presence can be relied upon when their own regulation is failing. This experience of reliability is among the most powerful inputs to the respect assessment. The person whose stability you have benefited from, whose groundedness helped you find your own when you were losing it, is not just abstractly admired. They are genuinely valued in a way that produces the durable respect that this audiobook is building toward. The practice of emotional stability in the context of respect is somewhat different from the emotional regulation practice described in the previous audiobook in this series. Though it draws on the same foundations, the regulation practice described there was primarily individual, the management of your own emotional states for your own better functioning. The emotional stability practice described here is primarily relational, the consistency of your regulated engagement with others across the conditions that the relationship and the social environment produce. The relational dimension adds a specific challenge. The emotional states of others are among the most powerful triggers for your own emotional activation. And maintaining stability in the face of others' instability requires a specific kind of non-contagion that the individual regulation practice does not fully develop. The anxious colleague, the frustrated partner, the provocative acquaintance, all of these are producing emotional inputs that the social system is designed to respond to with corresponding outputs. The emotional stability that produces respect requires the governance of this reciprocal activation, the capacity to receive the other person's emotional display without the automatic generation of a corresponding emotional display in response. The non-contagion practice begins with the recognition that is the foundation of all the observer position work in this series. The other person's emotional state is theirs, and your response to it is yours. The two are related but not identical, and the relationship between them is governed by your regulatory capacity rather than by the automatic contagion mechanism. This recognition does not require coldness toward the other person's state. You can be genuinely responsive to what they are experiencing without your own internal state being hijacked by it. Genuine responsiveness to another person's emotional state from a position of internal stability is, in fact, one of the most valuable and most rare social qualities available. The person who can engage with your distress without being destabilized by it, who can be present with your difficulty without the distance of emotional shutdown or the contagion of emotional matching, is providing something that most people cannot. They can attend to your actual experience because they are not managing their own activation at the same time. This quality is recognized and deeply valued, and it is one of the primary expressions of the emotional stability that produces respect. The long-term development of emotional stability requires the specific practice of consistency across conditions, the deliberate maintenance of the same quality of engagement across the situations where stability is easy and the situations where it is genuinely difficult. The consistency across these conditions is what builds the assessment of reliability that respect requires. And it is also what builds the internal capacity that makes the stability progressively more genuine rather than more performed. The performed stability, the maintenance of the appearance of stability through significant internal effort, as a social presentation rather than as the expression of a genuine internal state, is detectable in ways that the genuine version is not. Because the performed version requires effort that is visible under sufficient pressure. The genuine stability, built through the consistent practice of the regulation practices described in this audiobook and its predecessors in this series, eventually becomes the natural expression of the internal state rather than the effortful management of it. The trajectory from performed to genuine stability is the same trajectory as all the other capacities in this series, built through consistent practice, accumulated over time, becoming progressively more natural and progressively less effortful as the neural infrastructure that supports it is strengthened through use. The destination, the emotional stability that is the genuine expression of a genuine internal state rather than a managed performance, is the version that produces the specific quality of respect that this audiobook is building toward. People can tell the difference, not always consciously, not always articulately, but reliably. The assessment of genuine versus performed stability is one of the social intelligence system's most practiced tasks, and it is rarely fooled over time by a performance that does not have genuine internal substance behind it. Building the genuine internal substance is therefore not only the more sustainable approach to emotional stability, it is the only approach that reliably produces the quality of social assessment that the genuine version of the quality deserves. Chapter 4. Calm Communication. How you say things communicates more about who you are than what you say. The voice carries the character. Calm communication is not a technique. It is not a set of verbal formulas or rhetorical strategies applied to the surface of ordinary interaction. It is the natural expression of the internal state that the preceding chapters have been building, the direct output of genuine presence, genuine stability, and the regulated relationship to emotional activation that the practices of this series develop. The person whose calm communication feels authoritative and real has it because they are actually calm, because the words are the expression of a genuine internal state rather than the performance of one. This matters because the specifically powerful quality of genuinely calm communication, the quality that produces the respect assessment rather than the mere social smoothness that can be technically produced through technique alone, is precisely what cannot be fully faked. The voice carries the internal state. The pacing, the tone, the quality of attention in the delivery, the absence of the minor signals of anxiety and self-monitoring that the genuinely regulated person does not produce. These are the communication channels that others are reading alongside the verbal content, and they are significantly more informative about the actual internal state than the verbal content alone. The specific features of calm communication that produce the respect assessment begin with the voice itself. The regulated voice, the voice that is not carrying the activation signals of anxiety, urgency, or defensive alertness, communicates the internal state before a single word of content has been delivered. Pace that is not rushed. Volume that is calibrated to the situation rather than amplified by activation. Tone that is consistent and even rather than the varying, irregular quality that activation produces. These features of vocal delivery are the first signals others register, and they set the frame within which the verbal content is received. The urgency signal is among the most socially influential vocal features, and its regulation is central to calm communication. Urgency communicates, before the content does, that the speaker is in an activated state, that something about the situation is producing the internal condition of pressure that urgency expresses. This pre-content communication immediately activates a corresponding state in the listener. They register the urgency before they have processed the content, and the content is then received through the filter of whatever the urgency communication has activated. When the urgency is appropriate, when there is genuine urgency, this chain is functional. When the urgency is the expression of the speaker's internal activation rather than of any genuine temporal pressure in the situation, it produces unnecessary activation in the listener and communicates something about the speaker's internal state that the speaker did not intend to communicate. The calm communicator has regulated the urgency signal not through the suppression of genuine urgency when it exists, but through the ongoing practice of not letting the activation state produce urgency signals in the voice when the situation does not warrant them. This regulation is one of the most practically powerful components of the calm communication quality. The person who speaks without urgency signals is experienced as someone who is not under the pressure that produces those signals, which communicates a specific quality of position and groundedness that others register and assess. The content dimensions of calm communication are the complement of the vocal ones. The first is economy, the use of fewer words to say what needs to be said, rather than the covert explanation and qualification that anxiety produces. The anxious communicator elaborates, restates, qualifies, adds the insurance of additional reasoning to the already delivered argument. This covert elaboration communicates the anxiety. It is designed to conceal. It signals that the speaker is not confident in the reception of the initial statement, which produces a corresponding reduction in the listener's confidence in it. The calm communicator says the necessary thing and allows it to stand, which communicates the confidence that makes others take it seriously. The second content dimension is precision, the use of specific, accurate language rather than the vague and hedging language that social anxiety produces. The precise statement commits. It occupies a clear position that can be agreed with or disagreed with. The vague, hedging statement is designed to avoid the risk of the clear commitment to say something that cannot be directly disagreed with because it does not say anything definitive enough to disagree with. This social risk management is transparent to others. The vague statement communicates the avoidance of commitment, which communicates the anxiety about the response to commitment, which communicates the dependence on positive reception that the respect-building orientation specifically overcomes. The third content dimension is the absence of preemptive apologetics, the reflexive hedging that precedes the actual content with disclaimers, qualifications, and apologies for the imposition of speaking. This preemptive apologetics is a social phenomenon driven by the attempt to reduce the risk of negative reception by preemptively acknowledging the possibility that the reception might be negative. It is transparent, and it communicates the same social anxiety about being received that the vague language communicates. The calm communicator does not apologize for what they are about to say before saying it. They say it, and if an apology is warranted by the content, they offer it after the content has been delivered rather than before. Direct communication, the clear, specific statement of what is meant, without the elaboration and hedging that anxiety requires, is one of the most specific respect-producing communication qualities because it is one of the most reliably associated with the absence of the social performance orientation. The person who speaks directly is not primarily managing how they are being received. They are primarily concerned with communicating accurately. This orientation toward clarity and accuracy rather than toward the management of reception is recognized and valued by others as a specific kind of integrity in communication. Listening and silence are the often overlooked dimensions of calm communication. The calm communicator does not fill every available silence. They allow the natural rhythm of exchange to include pauses, which communicates the absence of the anxious need to maintain constant verbal activity that social anxiety produces. The silence of the genuinely calm person is not uncomfortable. It is simply the space in which genuine thought can occur before the next genuine statement is made. Others experience this quality as groundedness rather than as the awkwardness they would experience from the silence of the socially anxious person who is working to conceal the anxiety. Calm communication, developed fully, is the social expression of the entire internal architecture that this audiobook builds. It is not a veneer applied to ordinary interaction. It is the authentic voice of the person who has built genuine presence, genuine stability, and the specific regulated relationship to social engagement that makes the calm expression natural rather than effortful. The voice that others hear in the calm communicator is the voice of someone who is not at the mercy of the social environment's current temperature, and that quality, recognized before it is analyzed, is the social signal from which much of the respect this audiobook builds begins. Chapter 5. Confidence without arrogance. True confidence does not need to diminish anyone else to exist. Arrogance does. That difference is visible to everyone except the arrogant. The confusion between confidence and arrogance is among the most consistent errors in the social presentation of strength, and it produces the specific outcome of undermining respect precisely while attempting to project the qualities that would create it. Understanding the distinction precisely not just intellectually but in terms of the internal states that produce each is essential to developing the genuine version of confidence rather than the distorted one that others experience as its opposite. Arrogance and genuine confidence share a surface resemblance. Both involve the presentation of a high self-assessment. The difference is in the internal architecture that produces the presentation. Genuine confidence is based on an accurate assessment of actual capability, actual record, and actual quality. It is the self-assessment that corresponds to the genuine evidence available. Arrogance is the inflation of self-assessment beyond what the genuine evidence supports, driven by the need to maintain a sense of superiority that the genuine evidence does not consistently provide. The arrogance-driven presentation of high self-assessment requires the continuous management of the social environment to maintain. Because the inflated self-assessment is not consistently supported by the actual evidence, the arrogant person must manage the social inputs that would challenge it, dismissing the competence of others so that their own appears relatively higher, deflecting criticism that would reveal the gap between the self-assessment and the actual performance, and asserting superiority in the specific domains where challenge is least likely. This management is effortful, is visible to others as the anxiety it is driven by, and produces the social response that arrogance consistently receives, the formal compliance that conceals the genuine absence of respect. Genuine confidence does not require this management, because the self-assessment is based on actual evidence. It does not require the dismissal of others' competence to maintain. Another person's competence is not a threat to an accurate self-assessment, because the accurate self-assessment does not depend on comparative superiority for its validity. The genuinely confident person can acknowledge others' strengths without experiencing this as a diminishment of their own, can receive criticism without experiencing it as a fundamental attack on their worth, and can maintain their self-assessment in the face of challenge without the defensive escalation that arrogance requires. This non-defensive quality is one of the primary social signatures of genuine confidence and is one of the primary ways others distinguish it from arrogance in practice. The genuinely confident person does not become defensive when questioned. They engage with the question from the internal security of a self-assessment that does not require the question not to be asked. The arrogant person becomes defensive because the question threatens the inflated self-assessment that the defensiveness is protecting. The difference in response to challenge is visible and reliably informative. Building genuine confidence requires the honest confrontation of the gap between the current self-assessment and the evidence that supports it, not the inflation of the self-assessment beyond the evidence, and not the deflation of it below the evidence, both of which are distortions that produce poor outcomes. The accurate self-assessment is the foundation of genuine confidence, the clear-eyed understanding of what you are actually capable of, what you have actually demonstrated, and where the genuine limits of your current development are. The accurate self-assessment is not fixed. It is updated by the ongoing accumulation of evidence from performance across the full range of conditions encountered. The person who has built their self-assessment from honest engagement with many genuine challenges, who has evidence of functioning well under genuine difficulty, of delivering on genuine commitments, of maintaining quality when quality required real effort, has a self-assessment that is both accurate and resilient, because it is based on the type of evidence that does not easily crumble under challenge. The specific social expression of confidence without arrogance is the combination of clarity about what you know and ability to do with genuine openness to what you do not know and cannot do. The genuinely confident person can say, "I am certain about this and I am not certain about that," with equal ease. Because neither statement threatens the self-assessment. The arrogant person cannot say I am not certain without experiencing it as a diminishment. Because the self-assessment requires the display of certainty to maintain its inflation. The social dynamics of confidence without arrogance in group settings reveal the quality most clearly. The genuinely confident person in a group does not need to be the most visible, the most often right, or the most clearly central to the group's functioning. They contribute what they genuinely have to contribute. Acknowledge when others have more relevant expertise or better judgment in specific domains, and are secure enough in their own value not to compete for dominance in every exchange. This non-competitive quality is experienced by the group as maturity and as the specific type of strength that makes the group function better, and it is one of the most powerful sources of the group-based respect that this audiobook builds toward. The arrogant person, by contrast, produces the specific group dynamic of the people around them managing the arrogance, the subtle adjustments, the careful framings, the avoidances of certain topics that the group develops to navigate the arrogant person's needs. This management is a form of social power in the sense that it shapes the group's behavior. But it is not the power of respect. It is the power of the inconvenience that must be managed. The distinction is not always visible to the person at the center of it. Confidence without arrogance is ultimately the social expression of the internal security that comes from an honest and well-supported self-assessment, the quality of being that does not require the environment's validation to maintain its sense of worth, and does not require the diminishment of others to maintain its sense of relative standing. This internal security is built through the honest confrontation with the actual evidence of actual performance, accumulated through genuine engagement with genuine challenges over sufficient time that the evidence is substantial. It cannot be shortcut, it can be built. Chapter 6. The Power of Listening. Most people listen in order to respond. The person who listens in order to understand is experiencing something fundamentally different, and so is the person being listened to. Listening is the most consistently underinvested quality in ordinary social development, and this underinvestment is costly in ways that are not always visible because the costs are primarily things that do not happen, the connections that do not deepen, the information that does not get communicated, the trust that does not build, the respect that does not develop because the engagement that would produce it never quite occurred. The quality of listening that most people engage in is genuinely limited. It is primarily preparatory. The apparent attention to what is being said is accompanied by the simultaneous preparation of the response, the retrieval of the relevant experience or opinion that will be contributed when the current speaker is done, the evaluation of the statement for points of agreement or disagreement that the response will address, the monitoring of when the pause will occur that will allow the response to begin. This preparatory listening is not experienced by the listener as inattention, it feels like engaged participation. From the speaker's perspective, it is experienced somewhat differently as the sense that the listener is present but not fully receiving, engaged but not quite connecting there but somewhere else at the same time. The gap between the experience of the prepared response listener and the experience of the genuine listener is what creates the specific social power of genuine listening. Most people, in most interactions, are operating in the prepared response mode. When they encounter the genuine listener, the person who is actually receiving what they are saying, following it completely, allowing it to land before forming any response to it, the experience is qualitatively different. It is the experience of being genuinely heard rather than socially processed. The social assessment that genuine listening produces is powerful and consistent. The person who genuinely listens is experienced as someone who is interested in the actual content of what you are saying rather than in the management of the social interaction. This interest is rare enough to be specifically recognized and specifically valued. It communicates, without announcement, a specific quality of regard for the other person, not the performed regard of the social performance orientation, but the actual allocation of genuine attentional resource to what the other person is saying and what it means. The respect that genuine listening produces is not primarily a response to the listener's intelligence or capability or social skill. It is a response to the experience of being genuinely received. This experience is so consistently associated with the absence of the social performance orientation that it reliably signals the presence of the internal qualities, the genuine presence, the non-anxious engagement, the security that does not require the management of the interaction for its own maintenance that respect is built from. The practice of genuine listening has specific components that are worth developing explicitly rather than leaving to emerge from the general development of presence. The first component is the suppression of the preparatory response activity while the other person is speaking. Not the complete elimination of thought. Genuine understanding requires engagement with what is being said, not the passive reception of sounds, the specific suppression of the simultaneous construction of the response that the prepared response listener engages in. The response can be formed after the speaker has finished. During the speaking, the cognitive activity should be directed at understanding rather than at preparation. This suppression is harder than it sounds, because the prepared response habit is deeply established in most social interactions, and the cognitive system generates the response preparation automatically. The practice is the consistent recognition of when the response preparation has begun, often well before the speaker has finished, triggered by the anticipation of where the statement is heading and the deliberate redirection of attention back to what the speaker is actually saying rather than to the anticipated completion. The actual statement frequently differs meaningfully from the anticipated one, and the person who is redirected back to the actual statement will respond to what was said rather than to what they expected to be said. The second component is the active following of the speaker's meaning rather than the passive reception of their words. Active following means tracking the structure of what is being communicated, the core claim, the evidence being offered, the emotional significance of the statement to the speaker, the gap between what is being said and what the speaker actually means. This tracking requires genuine cognitive engagement, which is precisely what distinguishes it from the passive seeming nodding that signals apparent attention while the cognitive resource is elsewhere. The third component is the pause before responding, the brief interval between the completion of the speaker's statement and the beginning of the listener's response that signals genuine processing rather than the prepared response mode's immediate discharge. The prepared response listener responds immediately because the response was ready before the speaker finished. The genuine listener responds after the brief pause that the completion of the processing requires. This pause is small but socially significant. It communicates that the response that follows is calibrated to what was actually said rather than to what was anticipated, which is the basis of genuine engagement rather than social processing. Information and understanding are the practical benefits of genuine listening that compound over time in ways that the prepared response listener does not accumulate. The genuine listener consistently receives more complete and more accurate information from every interaction, because the speaker who is genuinely being heard communicates more fully and more honestly than the speaker who senses partial reception. The depth of understanding that builds through a relationship of genuine listening is qualitatively different from the surface-level understanding that accumulates through prepared response interactions. The specific respect that genuine listening produces over time is the respect that forms in the experience of a consistent quality of attention, the accumulated evidence across many interactions that this person is actually receiving you when you speak. This accumulated evidence is among the most powerful single inputs to the respect assessment available in ordinary relationships. It is available to every person in every relationship. The investment it requires is the one that this chapter develops, not the performance of listening, but the genuine direction of attention toward what the other person is actually saying and actually meaning. The person who has developed genuine listening has something rare and valuable, not a technique, a quality of engagement that others experience as a form of being genuinely seen, and that produces, over time, the specific quality of regard that is the deepest form of the respect this audiobook is building. Chapter 7: Social Awareness. The person who reads the room accurately is not more intuitive than others. They are more attentive. Social awareness, the capacity to accurately perceive what is actually happening in a social situation, below the surface of what is being said and above the level of any individual's stated position, is one of the qualities most consistently associated with the kind of social competence that produces respect. It is frequently described as intuition, which is partly accurate and mostly misleading. The person with well-developed social awareness is not accessing information through some non-rational channel. They are processing a much richer set of observable signals than the person who attends only to the verbal content of social interactions. And the integration of that richer signal set produces conclusions that appear intuitive to those who did not observe the processing. The signals that social awareness attends to are the nonverbal and contextual dimensions of social situations, the vocal qualities that communicate emotional state alongside and sometimes against the verbal content, the physical comportment that signals engagement or disengagement, the relational dynamics that are expressed in who speaks to whom and in what tone and with what degree of deference, the timing and pacing of interactions that reveal the comfort or discomfort of the participants, the gaps between what is being said and what the totality of the observable signals suggests is actually being communicated. These signals are available to anyone with the attention to observe them. They are not hidden, not available only to specialists, not accessible only through unusual perceptual gifts. They are the ordinary fabric of social interaction, present in every conversation and every group dynamic, legible to anyone who is attending to them rather than exclusively to the verbal content. The development of social awareness is therefore primarily the development of attentional discipline, the consistent extension of the observation to the full range of signals present rather than only to the verbal subset. The practice of social awareness begins with the deliberate observation of the nonverbal signals that accompany verbal communication. not the pop psychology cataloging of specific gestures as definitive indicators of specific states that is both less reliable and less interesting than the genuine attentiveness to the full constellation of signals that a social situation produces. The genuine attentiveness asks, what is the totality of what I am observing communicating, and how does it relate to what is being said? The gap between what is being said and what the totality of signals is communicating is the most socially informative observation available in any interaction. The person who says they are fine while the vocal quality, the physical tension, and the quality of engagement are all communicating something different is not simply being dishonest. They may not be consciously aware of the gap themselves. The observer who perceives the gap has information about what is actually happening that is more accurate than the verbal statement provides, and the choices made with that more accurate information are qualitatively different from the choices made only from the verbal statement. Group dynamics are the second primary domain of social awareness, the specific awareness of the relational structure within any group that shapes how the group actually functions regardless of its formal structure. Every group has an informal hierarchy, a set of alliances and tensions, a collection of implicit rules about what can and cannot be said to whom and in what context, and a set of functional roles that members have settled into regardless of their formal titles or descriptions. The socially aware person observes and maps this informal structure as a matter of course, not through deliberate intelligence gathering, but through the consistent attentiveness that turns ordinary group interaction into a continuous source of relational information. Who defers to whom on which topics? Whose statements receive expansion and whose receive gentle redirection? Where is the energy in the room concentrated? And what is it concentrated around? These observations, accumulated across many interactions, produce an accurate and practically useful model of the group's actual functioning that the person who attends only to the formal structure and the verbal content does not develop. The practical value of social awareness for respect production is specific and significant. The socially aware person does not commit the social errors that the socially unaware one consistently makes. They do not raise the topic that the group's dynamics have made sensitive. They do not challenge the person whose position in the informal hierarchy makes the challenge a gesture with costs the challenger has not assessed. They do not push for the outcome whose timing is wrong given the current state of the relational dynamics. The consistent absence of these social errors is one of the primary ways that social awareness makes itself visible to others. And the respect it produces is the respect for someone who clearly understands how things actually work rather than only how they are formally supposed to. Timing is the dimension of social awareness that is most practically consequential and most consistently underappreciated. The same statement made at different moments in the development of a social situation can produce entirely different responses. The statement that would have been heard and acted upon earlier in the meeting is dismissed later because the group has moved past the point where it was receivable. The request that would have been granted easily in a different relational moment is declined because the current relational temperature is not the right one for it. The socially aware person reads the timing and calibrates their interventions to the moments when they will be most received. Social awareness, developed as a consistent attentional practice, produces a specific quality of social competence that others experience as understanding the quality of being with someone who is genuinely oriented toward what is actually happening rather than toward what they are performing or managing. This quality is quietly powerful in the specific way this audiobook's title names. It does not announce itself. It is simply present, consistently, in the accuracy with which the socially aware person reads and responds to the situations they encounter. Over time, this accuracy compounds. The accurate read produces the appropriate response, which produces the better outcome, which builds the evidence base for the respect assessment. The person who consistently understands what is actually happening is trusted with situations where the accurate understanding of what is actually happening matters, which are the situations where the most significant respect is earned and the most significant trust is built. Chapter 8. Controlled Reactions. How you react to unexpected, difficult, or provocative events is the most informative thing about your character that others have access to. It is also the thing most difficult to fake. The chapter on controlled reactions comes late in this audiobook deliberately. The preceding chapters have been building the internal architecture, the presence, the stability, the genuine confidence, the listening quality, the social awareness that makes controlled reactions the natural expression of a genuine internal state rather than the effortful management of an activated one. The controlled reaction that emerges from genuine internal stability is qualitatively different from the controlled reaction that is the white-knuckled suppression of a reactive impulse that is fully present and straining for expression. The first communicates something valuable. The second communicates the effort of its own suppression. What others observe in your reactions is not just the content of the reaction, what you said, what you did, what position you took. It is the quality of the reaction, the speed at which you moved from event to response, the presence or absence of the activation signals that indicate the response is coming from the emotional system rather than from the deliberate mind. The degree to which the response appears calibrated to what the situation actually requires rather than to what the emotional state is driving. These qualities of the reaction are legible to observers in the way that all genuine expressions of internal state are legible through the full range of signals that the response produces, not only through the verbal content that the response delivers. The respect that controlled reactions produce is the respect of reliability under genuine pressure. The person who responds to unexpected difficulty with the same quality of engagement they bring to expected and comfortable situations is demonstrating that their composure is not condition dependent, that it is a feature of their character rather than a feature of their circumstances. This demonstration is among the most informative things others can observe about a person, and the information it provides is heavily weighted in the respect assessment. The specific types of situations in which reactions are most revealing are the ones in which the emotional activation is highest and the social expectation of reciprocal intensity is strongest. The public criticism or challenge that many would experience as an attack requiring defense. The unexpected bad news that many would express through visible distress. The provocative comment designed to produce a reactive response. The unfair treatment that many would respond to with anger or resentment. In each of these situations, the social script specifies a reactive response, and the expectation of the reactive response is built into the social context. The person who provides something different, who responds from the deliberate mode when the social context was expecting the reactive one, produces a specific effect that is difficult to ignore and impossible to fake. The practice of controlled reactions is built from the foundations of all the preceding chapters. with the specific addition of the implementation practice, the consistent application of the pause between event and response in the actual social situations where the reactive default is most strongly activated. The pause in the social context is not the dramatic theatrical pause that calls attention to itself. It is the brief, natural interval between the incoming event and the outgoing response that the deliberate mode requires. It is the interval in which the full cognitive picture can be briefly accessed rather than the emotionally filtered partial picture that the reactive mode produces. It is the interval in which the question, "What does this situation actually require?" as distinct from "What is my activated state driving toward?" can be answered. The content of the controlled reaction is secondary to its quality. The same substantive response, the same statement of position, the same acknowledgement of difficulty, the same expression of disagreement delivered from a controlled, deliberate state produces a qualitatively different social effect than the same content delivered from an activated, reactive state. The controlled delivery communicates that the content reflects genuine assessment. The reactive delivery communicates that the content reflects the emotional state rather than the assessment. Others know the difference and weight it accordingly in their assessment of what was communicated. One specific application of controlled reactions deserves particular attention: the response to public challenge or criticism. This is the situation in which the reactive impulse is most strongly activated in most people: the impulse to defend, to counterattack, to assert the challenge's error with sufficient force to establish its dismissal. This impulse is so consistently present, and the social expectation of some version of it is so deeply embedded, that any significant departure from it is immediately noticeable. The controlled response to public challenge takes several possible forms depending on the specific situation, but all of them share the quality of being calibrated to the actual substance of the challenge rather than to its activation of the defensive impulse. The genuine consideration of the challenge before responding, the specific engagement with the accurate elements of it rather than its wholesale dismissal, the clear, non-defensive maintenance of the elements that the challenge did not actually undermine, the acknowledgement of what the challenge reveals rather than the defense against it. Each of these is a form of controlled response that communicates to observers something specific and valuable: that this person is not governed by the defensive impulse, is secure enough to engage honestly with challenge, and is more interested in accuracy than in the protection of a position. This specific quality, the willingness to genuinely engage with challenge rather than to defend against it, is one of the most powerful single signals of the internal security and the genuine confidence that respect is built from. It is rare, it is visible, and the assessment it produces in the people who observe it is precisely the kind of trust and respect that the performing of confidence and the defensive maintenance of position never produce. Controlled reactions, built from genuine internal stability rather than from effortful suppression, are ultimately the most visible external expression of everything this audiobook has been building. The presence, the emotional stability, the genuine confidence, the social awareness, all of these are invisible in their foundations. They become visible in the quality of reactions, especially the reactions in the situations where the social expectation was for something different. Chapter 9. Silent Authority. Silent authority is not the absence of communication. It is the communication that does not require words. The concept of silent authority is the cumulative expression of everything the preceding 8 chapters have built, the point at which the individual qualities of presence, stability, confident competence, genuine listening, social awareness, and controlled reactions have been sufficiently integrated and sufficiently consistent that they produce a specific social effect that is greater than the sum of its parts. Silent authority is the quality of social presence that shapes the environment without explicit direction, that influences how others behave, how groups function, and how situations develop through the simple fact of being present in them with a specific quality of character. The person with silent authority does not need to assert their position. The position is evident. They do not need to demand respect. The respect is produced automatically by the accumulated evidence of the qualities that the preceding chapters have built. They do not need to manage the room. The room adjusts to them. This may sound like an exaggeration. It is not. The specific quality of social influence that genuine silent authority produces is a real and consistently observable social phenomenon, and it operates through the specific mechanisms that the preceding chapters have described in detail. The mechanism is the social calibration that everyone is continuously performing of every other person in their environment, the ongoing assessment of who is reliable, who is stable, who can be trusted with genuine difficulty, whose judgment is worth attending to. The person whose accumulated behavioral record has produced a consistently high assessment on all of these dimensions has earned a specific quality of social standing that operates through those assessments rather than through explicit assertion. The silence in silent authority is not the silence of absence or the silence of withholding. It is the silence that communicates something specific, the quality of presence that does not require performance to maintain itself. The person with genuine silent authority does not need to be the most visible person in the room, does not need to speak most often or most loudly, does not need to assert their position or defend their standing. These needs are the expressions of the insecurity that genuine authority does not have. The person with genuine authority has no standing to defend because the standing has already been established through the accumulated evidence of the behavioral record rather than through the social performance of any given moment. The specific social effect of silent authority in group contexts is the adjustment dynamic, the subtle but real way in which others calibrate their behavior in the presence of the person who has it. The escalating conflict that de-escalates when the person with genuine authority enters the space, not because they said anything, but because their presence is a reminder of the standard of engagement that the conflict had departed from. The decision-making process that naturally gravitates toward the person whose judgment has been demonstrated as reliably good rather than toward the person who is most assertively claiming authority in the moment. The social temperature of a group that consistently settles when the stabilizing presence of the genuinely grounded person is in it. These effects are real. They are not the product of formal power or organizational title. Though they can coexist with those, they are the product of the specific social assessment that the person with silent authority has earned through the consistent demonstration of the qualities that the preceding chapters develop. The assessment is real, and its behavioral effects are real, and the person who has built what produces the assessment benefits from those effects in every social context they enter. The way silent authority is developed is precisely what this audiobook has been describing through the consistent demonstration of the underlying qualities across many situations over sufficient time that the assessment is well established and well evidenced. This is not a shortcut to authority. It is the only genuine path to it. There are paths to the appearance of authority that are faster the cultivation of the specific social behaviors associated with high-status individuals. The deliberate management of impression through the strategic deployment of the visible signals of authority. These paths produce a version of authority that functions adequately in conditions where the assessment is not deeply probed and the behavioral record across difficult conditions is not examined. They fail in exactly the conditions where the distinction matters most, the genuinely difficult situations where the gap between performed and genuine authority becomes visible, and where the person with genuine authority becomes the person others actually turn to. The specific qualities that constitute silent authority in its most developed form can be described as three integrated characteristics that operate simultaneously. The first is composure under genuine pressure, the demonstrated ability to maintain the quality of engagement and the quality of judgment when the situation is making both genuinely difficult. This is the characteristic that is most informative and most weighted in the authority assessment, because it is the hardest to fake and the most directly relevant to the situations where authority actually matters. The second is clarity of judgment, the demonstrated ability to assess situations accurately and to communicate assessments clearly, without the hedging and qualification that uncertainty and social anxiety produce. The person whose assessments are consistently accurate and consistently communicated with appropriate confidence earns the specific trust that makes others seek their judgment in the situations where accurate judgment matters most. The third is the absence of the need for authority to be asserted. This characteristic is the paradoxical heart of silent authority. The authority is most genuine when its holder does not require it to be recognized. The person who needs others to acknowledge their authority, who asserts it when it is not recognized or defers to others when it might be challenged, has a version of authority that is contingent on the social recognition that genuine authority does not depend on. The absence of this need, the complete security in one's own assessment of one's own standing, is the quality that communicates the genuine article most unmistakably. Silent authority, fully developed, is the social expression of genuine internal strength, the quiet power that this audiobook's title names. It is quiet because it does not need to be loud. It is powerful because it operates through the most durable and most influential social mechanism available, the honest assessment of the people around you, formed from the accumulated evidence of who you are when it matters. Chapter 10. Becoming a person others respect. You do not become a person others respect. You become the person you genuinely are, consistently, across all conditions. The respect follows from that. This final chapter addresses the integration challenge and the identity dimension of the entire project, the specific question of what it means to have built all of the individual qualities described in the preceding 9 chapters, and to be living them as a coherent and consistent way of being, rather than as a collection of practices applied in specific situations. The distinction between having the practices and being the person is the final and most important one in this audiobook. The practices are the path. The person is the destination, and the destination is not a specific collection of behaviors. It is the internal state from which those behaviors naturally flow. Without the effortful application of techniques and without the ongoing deliberate management of social performance, it is the state of being genuinely present. genuinely stable, genuinely confident, genuinely attentive, genuinely aware, genuinely controlled, and genuinely authoritative, not as performances but as the natural expression of who you actually are. The identity dimension of the development described in this audiobook is the most significant and the most slowly built. The practices come first: the deliberate application of the pause, the consistent attention to presence, the ongoing work on the regulated relationship to emotional activation, the building of the genuine confidence through the honest engagement with genuine challenges. These practices, applied consistently over time, gradually build the internal architecture that makes the practices progressively unnecessary as explicit techniques because they have become the natural way of engaging. The person who has built genuine psychological presence does not apply a presence technique in social situations. They are simply present, because presence has become the natural state rather than the deliberate achievement. The person who has built genuine emotional stability does not manage their reaction regulation in difficult situations. They engage from a stable internal state, because stability has become the natural condition rather than the effortful alternative to reactivity. The person who has built genuine silent authority does not deploy authority as a social tool. They simply are who they are, and the authority is the social recognition of that quality. This progressive naturalization of the built qualities is what distinguishes the person who has genuinely developed in the direction this audiobook describes from the person who is skillfully applying the practices without the underlying identity shift. Both may produce similar behavioral outputs in many situations. The difference becomes visible in the situations where the underlying identity is most revealing: the genuinely unexpected difficulty, the sustained pressure, the confrontation with a significant challenge to the self-unapt, the social situation in which the techniques have no obvious application and the person must simply be who they are. In those revealing situations, the person who has genuinely built the internal architecture is the same person they are in the comfortable situations. The person who has built only the techniques may not be, and others know, not always articulately, not always immediately, but reliably over time. The specific character of the person who has built what this audiobook describes can be sketched in terms of what others consistently experience in their presence. They experience consistency, the sense of being with the same person across different contexts and different conditions. The reliability of character that consistency produces. They experience genuine attentiveness, the quality of being actually received rather than socially processed, of having the conversation that is genuinely about what it is supposed to be about rather than about the management of social performance. They experience groundedness, the quality of being with someone who is not primarily moved by the social temperature of the moment, whose stability is not contingent on the approval of the room. They experience honesty, not the brutal or performative honesty that is sometimes confused with the genuine kind, but the honest engagement with what is actually the case, including the honest acknowledgement of what is uncertain, what is error, and what is the accurate assessment of difficulty. They experience competence without display, the quality of someone who knows what they know and is secure enough not to need to perform their knowing for the validation of others. And they experience the quiet authority that is the cumulative effect of all of these, the sense of being with someone who is fundamentally reliable, fundamentally genuine, fundamentally trustworthy in the deepest and most durable sense of the word. The person who produces this experience consistently across the full range of conditions they encounter does not need to pursue respect. The respect is the accurate social assessment of who they genuinely are, and it is conferred automatically by others whose social intelligence system is designed precisely to make that assessment, pursuing it actively, managing the social performance to produce it, deploying techniques to project the qualities that would earn it, produces a version of it that is thinner and more fragile than the genuine article. Building the genuine internal qualities that the genuine article requires is the only path to the version that is both durable and deserved. Becoming a person others respect is therefore not primarily a social project. It is an internal one. The social outcomes follow from the internal development. They cannot precede it, and the internal development is the work, the genuine work, the honest work, the work that is often uncomfortable and consistently underawarded in the short term of building the qualities that the 10 chapters of this audiobook describe. The qualities are buildable, the work is available, and the person at the other end of the work, the person you become through the consistent practice of presence, stability, confidence, listening, awareness, controlled reaction, and genuine authority, is different in ways that are initially small and eventually significant from the person who does not do the work. That difference accumulates, it compounds. It becomes, over time, the specific quality of a life that is lived from genuine internal strength rather than from the social performance of it. That is what the quiet power is, and that is what makes others respect the person who has it. Closing. The architecture of quiet power. 10 chapters, 1 integrated quality. The quality is not a list of social behaviors. It is the specific internal architecture that produces certain social behaviors as its natural expression, behaviors that others experience as presence, stability, genuine confidence, attentiveness, social accuracy, composure, authority, and the consistent character that these qualities together constitute. Chapter 1 established the foundational distinction between popularity and respect, and therefore between the behaviors that produce each. Popularity is the product of behaviors that produce immediate positive effect, the entertainment, the agreement, the performance of likability that earns warm responses in the moment. Respect is the product of something more durable, the accumulated evidence of behavioral consistency across conditions, the willingness to maintain positions under social pressure, the absence of the performance orientation that others recognize and discount. The respect assessment is an assessment rather than a feeling, which makes it more resistant to manufacture and more reliable once formed. The stability of popularity and the stability of respect are fundamentally different, and the transition from one orientation to the other requires the genuine acceptance of reduced immediate social reinforcement in exchange for the development of something more lasting. Chapter 2 builds psychological presence, the genuine, attentive, grounded quality of being fully in the situation rather than in the social performance of the situation, the self-monitoring function and its costs, the future orientation habit and its attenuation of genuine presence, the specific practices of returning attention to the actual immediate situation rather than to the anticipated or the assessed version of it. The groundedness that consistent presence practice produces, the center of gravity that is internal rather than determined by the social temperature of the environment, and the specific social effect that genuine presence produces, the experience of being with someone who is actually there. Chapter 3 developed emotional stability, not the absence of feeling, but the quality of being that does not require the environment to be stable in order to remain stable itself. The distinction between the stability that holds in comfortable conditions and the stability that holds in difficult ones, and the specific respect that the latter produces in its observers. The stabilizing function of the emotionally stable person in group environments, and the specific experience of being with someone who can receive your distress without being destabilized by it. The trajectory from performed stability, effortful and detectable, to genuine stability, which is the natural expression of a genuine internal state rather than the managed maintenance of an appearance. Chapter 4 addressed calm communication, the natural expression of the internal state rather than a set of verbal techniques applied to the surface of interaction. The vocal qualities that communicate the internal state before the content does the pace, the volume, the tone, the presence or absence of urgency signals. The content qualities of economy, precision, and the absence of preemptive apologetics. The social power of direct communication as the expression of the non-performance orientation, and silence, the willingness to allow pauses that the anxious communicator cannot tolerate as the specific communication of the groundedness that does not require constant verbal activity to maintain. Chapter 5 developed confidence without arrogance and the specific internal architecture that distinguishes the genuine from the distorted version. The arrogance-driven presentation as the management of social inputs to maintain an inflated self-assessment, and the visibility of this management to others as the anxiety it is driven by. The genuine confidence as the non-defensive security of an accurate self-assessment built from honest engagement with actual performance across actual challenges. The non-competitive quality of genuine confidence in group settings. And the specific social signature of the genuine version, the ability to acknowledge others' competence without experiencing it as a diminishment, to receive criticism without experiencing it as an attack, and to maintain positions under challenge without the defensive escalation that insecurity requires. Chapter 6 built the power of genuine listening, the most consistently underinvested quality in ordinary social development, and the one that produces perhaps the most immediate and most consistently recognized social effect when it is genuinely present. The prepared response mode as the ordinary condition of social interaction, and what genuine listening requires to replace it, the suppression of the simultaneous response preparation, the active following of meaning rather than the passive reception of words, and the pause before responding that signals genuine processing. The specific social experience of being genuinely heard as one of the most directly productive inputs to the respect assessment available in ordinary relationships. Chapter 7 developed social awareness, the accurate perception of what is actually happening in social situations below the surface of the verbal content. The attentional extension to the full signal set, vocal qualities, physical comportment, relational dynamics, timing and pacing, the gap between verbal content and the totality of what the observable signals are communicating. The mapping of informal group structures as the practical knowledge that allows effective navigation of the social environments most people only navigate by the formal structure. And timing, the specific dimension of social awareness that is most consequential and most underappreciated. Chapter 8 addressed controlled reactions, the most informative thing about character that others have access to, and the most difficult to fake, the quality of the reaction as distinct from its content. the specific respect that composure under genuine pressure produces. The implementation practice of the pause in actual high-stakes social situations. The specific application to public challenge and criticism. And the specific social effect of the non-defensive engagement with challenge, the willingness to genuinely consider rather than to reflexively defend, as one of the most powerful single signals of the internal security that respect is built from. Chapter 9 named the cumulative quality that the preceding 8 chapters produce: silent authority, the social presence that shapes the environment without explicit direction, earned through the accumulated evidence of consistent demonstration of the underlying qualities. The 3 integrated characteristics: composure under genuine pressure, clarity of judgment, and the absence of the need for authority to be asserted. The paradoxical heart of genuine authority: it is most genuine when its holder does not require it to be recognized. And Chapter 10 named the destination and its nature: not a person with a specific set of social skills, but a person who is genuinely who they are, consistently, across all conditions. The progressive naturalization of the built qualities until they are the natural expression of the person rather than the deliberate application of the practices. The way the internal development produces the social outcomes, not the other way around. And not simultaneously, the respect as the accurate social assessment of genuine qualities genuinely present. The quiet power this audiobook builds is not social strategy. It is not a set of techniques for producing specific social effects. It is the genuine development of genuine qualities, the patient, consistent, often uncomfortable building of the internal architecture that makes the qualities real rather than performed. Real qualities produce real assessments. Real assessments produce real respect. And real respect is the experience, for the person who has earned it, of being trusted with genuine things, of occupying a place in others' regard that is based on accurate perception of what they are actually dealing with rather than on the managed impression of it. That place is built slowly, through presence in ordinary moments, through stability under genuine pressure, through honest engagement over comfortable performance, through the consistent demonstration of who you are when it costs something to be that. The respect is not something you earn once. It is something you continue to be. Quietly, consistently. The quiet power.